The gravel road up to the radar site made a sound I didn't expect. Not the crunch you get on a driveway. More of a pop and slide, like the stones were too round or too dry. My contractor pickup handled it fine, but the steering wheel wanted to pull left every few seconds. Probably ruts worn in from supply trucks. I could see the dome from about a mile out. White, big, sitting on top of a concrete platform that looked too small for it. The thing swayed. Not a lot, but enough that I noticed it while I was still driving. Wind was coming steady from the west, and the dome rocked a little bit each time a gust hit. I figured that was normal. Had to be normal, or they wouldn't build it that way. Dusk was coming down behind Beaver Slide Hill, which is this low ridge west of Glasgow that doesn't look like much but blocks the sunset earlier than you'd think. The light went orange, then sort of gray-blue, and the shadows got long across the grass and sagebrush on both sides of the road. Cold, too. It was early March, and Montana doesn't care what the calendar says. I had the heat on in the truck. I took this job because I needed it. That's the short version. The longer version is I'm 34. I got divorced 6 months ago, and I was working night shifts at a warehouse in Billings where people talked too much and the fluorescent lights made my eyes hurt. When the contractor listing came through for a solo overnight gig, temp work, watching a National Weather Service site while a tech crew swapped parts on the radar, I called the same day. Steady pay. No people. Just me and a building and some equipment I didn't have to fix, only monitor. I was tired of night shifts around people. That was the thing. I didn't mind staying up. I didn't mind the quiet or the weird hours. I just didn't want to hear anyone's weekend plans or whose truck broke down or who was sleeping with who in logistics. This job offered isolation and a paycheck. That was enough. The gate was chain link, about 8 feet tall, with a plain metal sign that said, National Weather Service. Glasgow NEXRAD. Authorized personnel only. It was open when I got there. A woman stood next to a white government SUV just inside, holding a clipboard in one hand and a ring of keys in the other. She watched me pull up and park beside her vehicle. Didn't wave, didn't smile, just waited. I got out and she nodded once. Jackson Cross? Yeah. Florence Buck, site coordinator. She was maybe 5'6", fit, with dark blonde hair pulled back tight. Gray eyes. She wore a field jacket that looked government issue and dark slacks that had dirt on the cuffs. You're on time. Tried to be. Good. She turned and started walking toward the building without checking if I followed. I did. The building was cinder block, painted white, but stained with rust streaks under the gutters. It sat right next to the dome platform, connected by a short concrete path. Single story. Flat roof. 2 small windows on the side I could see and a metal door with a deadbolt. The dome loomed over it, still swaying a little in the wind. Up close, the movement was more obvious. Kind of unsettling, honestly. Florence unlocked the door and pushed it open. Lights were already on inside. She stepped in, and I followed her into a narrow hallway that smelled like dust and old coffee and something metallic I couldn't place. Maybe generator exhaust. Offices here, she said, stopping at the first door on the left. It was a small room, maybe 10 by 12, with a desk, a couple of filing cabinets, and a big monitor on the wall showing a radar status screen. Lots of green text on black, numbers I didn't recognize. A keyboard and mouse sat on the desk below it, next to a coffee mug someone had left behind. The mug had a faded logo for a seed company. Monitor updates every 30 seconds, Florence said. You don't need to touch it, just watch for red text. Red means a fault. Got it. She moved back into the hallway. Bunk room. She opened the next door. I looked in. 2 narrow beds with thin mattresses and gray wool blankets. A small table between them with a lamp. No windows. Looked like every cheap motel room I'd ever seen, but smaller. Bathrooms at the end of the hall, she said, already walking. Shower works, but the pressure's bad. Don't run it longer than 5 minutes or the generator complains. I nodded. She turned into another doorway, and I followed her into a utility room that was mostly breaker panels and a big steel cabinet with vents on the sides. Generator, I figured. Breakers are labeled, Florence said, tapping the panel door. Don't touch them unless the power actually goes out. Generator kicks on automatic if that happens. But if it doesn't, there's a manual start button here. She pointed to a red button on the cabinet. You call me if you have to use it. Okay. She looked at me for a second, then walked back out. I followed her to the office again. She set the clipboard on the desk and pulled a radio off her belt, setting it down next to the clipboard. County fire traffic comes through on Channel 3, she said. You don't need to respond, just background. Lets you know if something big is happening nearby. Makes sense. Joseph Barker's crew was here this afternoon, she said. They pulled the waveguide assembly and some of the transmitter components. They'll be back tomorrow night to finish the install. Your job is to keep the lights on and make sure nothing weird happens to the dome or the platform. What counts as weird? Structural movement, loud noises from the dome, anything that doesn't sound like wind. She didn't blink. You log it if you see it. You call me if it's a generator failure or a real fault on the dome, not for anything else. What about not for anything else? She said again. Her voice didn't get louder, just flatter. This site's been here since 2012. It runs stable. Your coverage while the crew's out. That's it. I figured she'd said this before, probably to a lot of temps who asked too many questions. Understood, I said. Florence reached into her jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She unfolded it, smoothed it flat on the desk, then slid it under the keyboard so it stuck out toward me. The paper had text on it. Looked like a printed list. Read this before I leave, she said. I looked at her. Her expression was flat, serious in a way that didn't match the rest of the briefing. She'd been professional the whole time, sure, but this was different. Her jaw was tight. Her eyes stayed on mine. It's important, she said. Okay. She didn't move, just stood there, waiting. I got the sense she wanted to watch me read it right then, but she didn't say that. After a second, she stepped back and picked up the clipboard. I'll be in my vehicle for another 10 minutes, she said. After that, I'm gone until tomorrow at 0700. Keys are on the desk. Lock the door when you do your rounds. Got it. She walked out. I heard her boots in the hallway, then the metal door opening and closing. I stood there in the office, looking at the paper under the keyboard and wondering what the hell kind of rules needed that kind of delivery. The door closed behind Buck. I heard her boots on the gravel outside, then the SUV door, then the engine. Headlights swept past the window and faded. That was it. Just me and the hum. The generator made this low, steady sound that came through the walls. Not loud, but constant. You couldn't really ignore it. The radio on the desk hissed quiet static on Channel 3. Outside, the wind pushed against the building in long pulls, and every so often the dome made this groaning noise. Metal flexing, probably. The whole structure swaying on the platform. I pulled out the office chair and sat down. The chair was one of those old rolling ones with cracked vinyl on the seat. It squeaked when I leaned back. I figured I'd just treat it like any other watch. Keep an eye on things. Stay awake. Collect the pay. Easy enough. The radar monitor kept updating every 30 seconds. Green text scrolling. System status, signal strength, some codes I didn't recognize. All normal, I guessed. Nothing red. I glanced at the paper still sitting under the keyboard. Buck's serious face when she'd told me to read it. That tight jaw. Yeah, I'd get to that. First, I wanted to see what I was actually watching here. There was a second monitor I hadn't noticed right away, smaller, mounted on the wall to the left of the desk. It showed a grid of 4 camera feeds in black and white. Top left was the hallway I'd just walked through. Empty, lights on, that metallic smell probably still hanging in the air. Top right showed the exterior, the path between the building and the dome platform, Nothing moving except some grass at the edge of the frame. Bottom left was another interior shot, harder to place. Looked like a stairwell or a ladder shaft, concrete walls, metal rungs going up. The dome access, probably. Bottom right was just static. No label, no image. Just gray fuzz. I stared at it for a second. Broken camera, maybe. Or turned off. The building creaked again. A long, low sound from somewhere in the walls, then a sharper pop from the ceiling. Old building settling, that's all. Concrete and metal expanding and contracting with the temperature. I'd heard it 1,000 times on job sites. Except this didn't feel quite like that. It had a rhythm to it. Not regular, but not random either. Like the building was breathing on its own schedule, and I just happened to be inside it. I shook that off. Tired brain making patterns out of nothing. I checked the time on my phone. 11:43. Long night ahead. I got up and did a lap around the office just to move. The filing cabinets were old gray steel, labeled with years. 2012 through 2019 on one, 20 through 24 on the other. The desk had 2 shallow drawers. I opened the top one. Pens, a small notepad, some sticky notes, a roll of electrical tape. The bottom drawer held a first aid kit and a flashlight. I pulled the flashlight out and tested it. Beam was strong, batteries good. I put it back and sat down again. The radio hissed. Outside, the dome groaned. The monitor updated, still green. I looked at the paper. Buck had been real deliberate about it. Read it before I leave. Important. She'd said it twice, in that flat way that meant she wasn't just covering procedure. She meant it. I pulled the paper out from under the keyboard and unfolded it the rest of the way. Printed text, single-spaced. A list. The first line was bold. Site monitoring guidelines. Glasgow NexRad. Below that, numbered rules. 10 of them. I read through. 1. Do not key the radio between 1:50 and 2:10 a.m. If the radio activates during this window, do not respond. That was specific. 2. If you hear knocking on the exterior door after midnight, do not open it. Log the time and number of knocks. Okay. 3. The dome access ladder is locked. Do not attempt to access the dome platform between sunset and sunrise. Fair enough? I wasn't planning to climb anything. 4. Camera 4, lower right monitor, will show static. Do not attempt to repair or reposition it. So that wasn't broken. It was supposed to be like that. Weird, but sure. 5. If the radar monitor displays red text, call Florence Buck immediately. Do not attempt to troubleshoot the system yourself. She'd already told me that. 6. Do not leave the building between 2 hours and 3 a.m. I read that one twice. 7. The generator will cycle at 4:15 a.m. Lights may flicker. This is normal. 8. If you see someone on the exterior camera who has not announced themselves via radio, do not go outside. Call Florence Buck. 9. The office door locks from the inside. Use it. I glanced at the door. Yeah, there was a push-button lock on the knob. 10. At the end of your shift, leave the paper on the desk under the keyboard exactly as you found it. I set the paper down and sat back. That was a lot of rules for a monitoring gig. Some of them made sense. Don't mess with equipment you don't know. Call the boss if something breaks. Standard stuff. But the rest of it felt off. The time windows, the knocking, the camera that was supposed to show static. I thought about Buck's face again. The way she'd looked at me when she handed this over. Not joking, not casual. This wasn't hazing. Or if it was, they'd committed to it way harder than any crew I'd worked with. I folded the paper again and slid it back under the keyboard, lined up the same way Buck had left it. Then I just sat there for a while. The generator hummed. The building creaked. The dome groaned when the wind hit it hard. I checked the monitors. Hallway empty, exterior path empty, ladder shaft empty, static on 4, checked the radar screen, green text, all normal. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through nothing for a bit. No signal out here, but I had some downloads, a couple podcasts I hadn't listened to. I put one on low, just for the sound of voices. Didn't help much. I turned it off after 10 minutes. At 1:15, I got up and walked to the bathroom. Narrow hall, fluorescent lights buzzing faint overhead. The bathroom was small, white tile, single toilet, sink, and a shower stall with a clear curtain. Everything old but clean. I used the toilet and washed my hands. The water came out rust orange for a few seconds before running clear. When I came back to the office, the monitors hadn't changed. I sat down and watched the clock on my phone. 1:26, 1:31, 1:48. At 1:50, I remembered the first rule. Don't key the radio between 1:50 and 2:10. I looked at the radio sitting on the desk beside Buck's clipboard. If the radio activates during this window, do not respond. I put my phone down. 1:51. The radio clicked, not loud, just a soft, mechanical sound, like someone had pressed the transmit button on the other end. I pulled my hands back into my lap. The speaker hissed for a second. Then a tone came through. High-pitched, steady, the kind of tone the weather service uses for alerts. It lasted maybe 5 seconds. Then it cut off. Silence. I didn't move. The speaker crackled, then a voice. Male, calm, clear. Jackson Cross, my full name. I stared at the radio. You've got a coffee stain on your right sleeve, the voice said. About 2 inches below the shoulder. Looks fairly fresh. I looked down. There was a coffee stain on my sleeve, small, brown, shaped kind of oval. I'd spilled some this morning at a gas station outside Billings and hadn't bothered changing. I hadn't mentioned it to Buck. Hadn't mentioned it to anyone. The hazing idea stopped feeling funny. I reached for the volume knob and turned it down. Not off. Just low enough that the voice became a hiss underneath the words, unintelligible. Then I sat back in the chair and put my hands in my lap. I kept my eyes on the monitors. Hallway, exterior, ladder shaft, static. Nothing moving. Nothing there. The radio kept hissing. I could hear the rhythm of speech underneath it, someone still talking, but I couldn't make out words anymore. I didn't try. I just waited. The clock on my phone read 1:52. 18 minutes to go. I watched the monitors and kept my hands still and told myself this was just part of the job. Whatever this was. Just sit it out. Let the window pass. The building creaked around me. The dome groaned outside. The radio hissed on. At exactly 2 in the morning, the radar monitor blinked and a new line appeared near the bottom. Red text. Hatch. My stomach dropped. Just straight up fell through the floor. I knew what that meant. I'd seen the dome access ladder on the camera feed. Camera 3, bottom left. That metal shaft went straight up through the building and into the dome itself. Probably had a maintenance hatch at the top so techs could get inside to service the rotating dish. And according to Rule 3 on Buck's paper, that ladder was locked. Specifically locked between sunset and sunrise. Nobody should be up there. The alarm started chirping. Not loud, but steady, insistent. The kind of sound that doesn't quit until someone acknowledges it or fixes whatever triggered it. High-pitched electronic beep, maybe once every 2 seconds. Regular as a heartbeat. I stared at the red text. Hatch. The radio had gone quiet around 2:10, just cut off mid-hiss. I'd turned the volume back up after the window closed, and it had returned to normal static and occasional fire traffic. Nothing weird. Now this. I pulled my eyes away from the radar monitor and checked the camera feeds. Hallway still empty. Exterior path still empty. Ladder shaft still showing concrete walls and metal rungs disappearing up into darkness. Static on camera 4. No movement anywhere. The chirping continued. Beep, beep, beep. I thought about Buck's instructions. Call her for generator failure or actual dome faults. This seemed like an actual dome fault. Hatch alarm going off. Red text on the monitor. That probably qualified. But I also thought about Rule 8. If someone appears on exterior camera without radio announcement, don't go outside and call Buck. This wasn't someone on the camera. This was an alarm saying the hatch was open when it shouldn't be. I reached for the desk phone. Then I stopped. Rule 6. Do not leave building between 2 and 3 in the morning. It was 2:01 now. I was in the middle of that window, and the hatch alarm had started right at the top of the hour, exactly when the restricted movement window began. That probably wasn't coincidence. I pulled my hand back. The chirping kept going. Beep, beep, beep. I realized I was holding my breath and forced myself to exhale. My hands were on my knees, gripping through the denim. I made myself relax them, tried to anyway. I looked at the paper under the keyboard, the list of rules. I'd read them all at least 3 times by now, memorized most of them. But I scanned through again, looking for anything about alarms or what to do if the hatch opened. Nothing. Just the 10 guidelines Buck had left. Don't key the radio during the window. Don't open the door if there's knocking. Don't access the ladder at night. Camera 4 stays broken. Call for red text. Don't leave between 2 and 3. Generator cycles at 4:15. Don't go outside if someone appears without warning. Lock the office door. Leave the paper where it is. None of that told me what to do about a hatch alarm. Beep, beep, beep. I checked camera 3 again. Ladder shaft, concrete and metal. No movement. If someone had climbed up there, they weren't in frame. The camera probably only covered the bottom section, maybe the first 20 feet. The hatch itself would be higher, up inside the dome. My phone said 2:02, 58 minutes left in the restricted window. I thought about Buck's tone when she'd explained the rules. Flat, professional, serious when she'd told me to read the paper, and that thing she'd said twice, very clearly. Call her for generator failure or actual dome faults, not for anything else. But she'd also put red text on the list. If the monitor displays red text, call immediately. This was red text. I reached for the phone again. The chirping stopped. Just cut off. Mid-beep, I froze with my hand halfway to the receiver. Silence, generator hum, wind outside, radio static, no alarm. I looked at the monitor. The red text was still there. Hatch. But the chirping had stopped. My heart was doing something unpleasant in my chest, fast and uneven. I pulled my hand back and put it on the desk. Flat. Steady. Then I heard it. 3 taps. Slow. Deliberate. From directly overhead. Not from the dome. That was outside, 30 feet away across the concrete path. This was from the ceiling of this room. The office ceiling. Tap, tap, tap. Like knuckles on metal. Or something harder. Fingernails, maybe. Something with a sharp edge. I looked up. White acoustic tiles, the kind with little holes. Standard drop ceiling. Fluorescent light fixture in the center, buzzing faintly. Nothing there. Tap, tap, tap. Closer this time. Or maybe it just felt closer. I could picture it now. Something on the roof directly above me. Not above the dome where it should be if this was actually a hatch malfunction. Above this building. Above this room. I realized I was holding my breath again. The tapping stopped. I waited. 5 seconds. 10. Nothing. I exhaled slow and checked my phone. 2:04. The smell hit me then. Wet dirt. Rich and dark. The way soil smells after heavy rain when it's been turned over. Fresh earth. It didn't belong in this office that smelled like dust and old coffee and metal. I looked around. The door was still closed. I'd locked it after Buck left. That push-button lock engaged. Windows were shut. No mud on the floor. No dirt tracked in. I'd walked the hallway twice already and hadn't seen anything. But the smell was there. Strong enough that I wasn't imagining it. I checked the monitors again. Nothing. Hallway empty, exterior empty, ladder shaft empty, static. The radar monitor still showed hatch in red text, but no chirping. Just that word, sitting there. I needed to log this. Buck had said to log observations, and I was pretty sure a hatch alarm, ceiling taps, and phantom dirt smell counted as observations. I looked around the desk. Notepad in the drawer. I'd seen that earlier. But Buck had mentioned a logbook, actual site logs where the previous shifts would have written things down. I hadn't seen one. I checked the desk surface first. Clipboard, radio, keyboard, mouse, coffee mug, my phone. No logbook. I pulled open the desk drawers again. Top right, top left, bottom drawer. Pens, notepad, tape, first aid kit, flashlight. No logbook. I looked under the desk. There it was. Black 3-ring binder, lying flat on the floor near the back wall where the desk met the corner. I had to lean way down to reach it. The cover was plain black vinyl with a printed label. Glasgow Nexrad Site Log. I pulled it out and set it on the desk. The binder was maybe 2 inches thick. I opened it to the first page. Entries going back to January of this year. Printed form sheets with date, time, shift operator name, and observation fields. Most of them were blank or just said no incidents or routine monitoring. Standard stuff. I flipped to the most recent entries. Last few days. Different names I didn't recognize. Probably other contractors doing the same thing I was doing now. Covering nights while the site ran minimal. Then I found Buck's handwriting. March 4th. Yesterday. Her entry was longer than the others. I recognized her tight, precise script from the signature on my work order. 0600-073008, HR's crew prep day. Barker's team arrived 1340 HRs. Began component removal 1430 hours. Observed standard dismount protocol. Night contractor, Cross J, briefed 1820 HRs on monitoring duties and site guidelines. Guidelines shortened from previous version per December review. Explanations removed. Explanations counted as answering. Answering is how it gets a grip. Cross acknowledged rules. Left on site 1840 Courage Troyers F. Buck. I read it twice. At 2:03, I looked back at Buck's logbook entry. That part about answering. How it gets a grip. I didn't want to think about what it was. The red hatch text was still there on the radar monitor. The smell of wet dirt hadn't faded. I needed to do something that counted as following the rules. Something concrete I could point to if Buck asked what I'd done during my shift. Rule 5 said to call Buck for red text. But the hatch alarm had stopped on its own, and I was pretty sure calling her at 2 in the morning about an alarm that wasn't even sounding anymore would count as the kind of thing she'd told me not to bother her about. She'd said generator failure or actual dome faults. The hatch was part of the dome access system, technically, but the text wasn't flashing, wasn't changing, just sitting there. I pulled the printed guidelines out from under the keyboard again and scanned down to Rule 5. If radar monitor displays red text, call Buck immediately without troubleshooting. That was clear enough, but then I read it again and noticed it didn't say anything about printing a status page first. Didn't say not to either. I figured if I was going to call her, I should probably have something to show for it. A record. That seemed like the kind of thing a contractor was supposed to do. Cover your ass with documentation. There was a printer on the floor under the desk, an old HP model with yellowed plastic and a power light that had been on since I got here. I leaned down and found the cable running from the radar monitor's computer tower. Took me a minute to figure out the keyboard shortcut. Control-P didn't do anything. I tried right-clicking the monitor display and finally found a small print status button in the corner of the interface. I clicked it. The printer made a sound I didn't like. A high whine, then a mechanical grinding that got louder. Something inside was jamming. The whole unit shook a little on the floor, rattling against the desk leg. I waited. The grinding continued for maybe 10 seconds, then it stopped. Nothing came out. I bent down to check the paper tray and saw it was full. Plenty of paper. No reason it should have jammed. Then the printer whined again, softer this time, and a single sheet slid into the output tray. I pulled it out. The paper was warm, not just warm from the fuser, actually warm, the way a sheet feels when it's been sitting in direct sunlight. I turned it over. The printout looked normal enough. Rows of green text showing system parameters, signal strength, azimuth position, elevation angle, standard radar stuff, except the date in the header read March 7th. Today was March 6th. I checked my phone, 2:04 a.m., March 6th. The report was dated for tomorrow. I read through the status lines again. Everything matched what I'd seen on the monitor. Same signal strength, same azimuth. But at the bottom of the page, under a section labeled Precipitation Returns, there was a thin graphical representation of the radar scan, mostly empty, just background noise. Except on the west edge there was a single straight line, perfectly horizontal, thin as a pencil mark. I'd worked around weather radar enough to know that wasn't normal. Precipitation shows up as blobs, clusters, curved fronts. Not straight lines. Straight lines usually meant interference. A glitch. Maybe a plane, though those moved, and this looked stationary. It was too clean, too precise. I set the paper on the desk and looked back at the monitor. The live display didn't show that line. Just the normal background scatter. Buck's instructions had said to log observations. The logbook was still open in front of me. I found a stapler in the top drawer and lined up the printout next to the current blank entry page. I pressed down on the stapler. The mechanism snapped shut hard, way harder than I'd expected, and the metal arm caught the tip of my thumb underneath. Pain shot up through my hand, sharp and immediate. I yanked my thumb back and saw blood welling up from a clean slice across the pad, just below the nail. The stapler had cut me. Not pinched. Actually cut, like the edge of the metal had been honed. A drop of blood fell and hit the printout, landing right on the date. March 7th. The red dot spread a little into the paper fibers. I grabbed a paper towel from the bathroom earlier and wrapped my thumb tight, pressing down hard. The bleeding slowed but didn't stop completely. I could feel my pulse throbbing in the cut. The printout was still there on the desk, stapled now to the logbook page, my blood drying into a small, rust-colored circle. I kept pressure on my thumb and wrote a quick entry with my other hand. 0203H's hatch alert displayed on radar monitor. Alarm ceased at approx. 0202R's printed status page per documentation protocol. Alert remains on screen. My handwriting looked shaky. I didn't mention the tapping, didn't mention the smell, which was still there, faint but present. I sat back in the chair. The paper towel around my thumb was starting to soak through. At 2:07, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Quick footsteps, bare feet on concrete, light and fast, moving from the direction of the bathroom toward the office. I looked at the camera feed showing the hallway. Empty. The footsteps got closer. I could hear them clearly now. Not boots, not shoes, skin on concrete, rhythmic and deliberate, heading straight for the office door. I reached for the flashlight on the desk without thinking, fingers closing around the handle, some old instinct telling me to have something solid in my hand. Then I stopped. Rule 4. Camera 4 was static, intentional, must not be repaired or repositioned. Rule 9. Office door locks from inside and should be used. I'd locked it when Buck left. The push-button lock was still engaged. The footsteps were right outside now, maybe 3 feet from the door. I forced my hand away from the flashlight and kept my eyes on the monitors. Hallway feed still showed nothing. The footsteps stopped. Then the camera grid on the second monitor switched. I didn't touch anything. Didn't click. Didn't move. The 4-panel view collapsed into a single feed. A new angle I hadn't seen before. Ceiling corner perspective looking down into the office. Looking down at me. I could see myself on the screen, sitting in the chair, hands on the desk, paper towel wrapped around my thumb, the logbook open, the radio beside it. The view was perfectly clear, better resolution than the other cameras. I watched myself on the monitor, watched my chest rise and fall, watched my shoulders shift slightly as I breathed. Then I realized something. The version of me on the screen wasn't blinking. I blinked. Felt my eyelids close and open. On the monitor, my eyes stayed open. Fixed, staring straight ahead at the desk. I blinked again. The screen version didn't. The wall phone rang. I jerked my eyes from the monitor showing me not blinking and looked at the desk phone. Old beige plastic, curly cord, red light blinking on the base unit. It rang again. The sound cut through the generator hum and made my wrapped thumb pulse harder. The caller ID display lit up green. 7 digits. I leaned forward. The number matched the site's own landline, printed on a label stuck to the phone base. The phone was calling itself. Rule 2 said, "Don't open the door if knocking occurs after midnight." Rule 8 said, "Don't go outside if someone appears on camera without radio announcement." I couldn't remember a rule about answering phones, but I remembered Buck's logbook entry. Explanations counted as answering. Answering is how it gets a grip. The phone rang a third time. I kept my hands flat on the desk. The paper towel around my thumb had soaked through in 2 spots, dark red spreading into the white fibers. My pulse beat in the cut with every ring. 4th ring. I didn't move. The monitor to my left still showed that ceiling angle of me sitting in the chair, and the screen version still hadn't blinked. I couldn't see its hands from that angle. Couldn't tell if the screen version was wrapping its thumb or if the blood was there. 5th ring. Then it stopped. The red light on the phone base went dark. The office filled back up with generator hum and the faint static from the radio. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding, and my shoulders dropped about 2 inches. The printer whined. I turned in the chair. The HP under the desk had its power light on, and the paper tray jerked forward with a mechanical click. No warming up sound this time. Just the sudden high whine of the fuser and the grinding of rollers pulling a sheet through. I hadn't touched anything. The printer shook against the desk leg for maybe 5 seconds, then went quiet. A page slid out into the tray, still warm. I could see the heat shimmer coming off it in the fluorescent light. I pulled the chair closer and leaned down, not picking up the page yet, just looking. It was another printout. Same layout as before, same header format, but this one didn't have radar parameters or precipitation data. This one had text, a numbered list. I recognized it immediately. The site monitoring guidelines. All 10 rules formatted exactly how they'd looked on the paper Buck left under the keyboard. My stomach went cold. I picked up the page. The paper felt too warm, and my good hand started sweating where I held the edge. I scanned down the list, checking each line against what I remembered. Rule 1, same. Radio silence window from 150 to 210. Rule 2, same. Don't open door for knocking, log time and number. Rule 3, same. Dome access ladder locked. Don't use between sunset and sunrise. Rule 4. I stopped. Rule 4 was different. It didn't say anything about camera 4 showing static. Instead, it read, if office door remains locked for more than 15 minutes during active monitoring, open door and visually confirm hallway status. Use interior camera as secondary verification only. I read it again. Then a third time. That wasn't the rule. The real Rule 4 said camera 4's static was intentional, and I shouldn't try to fix it or move it. I'd read that version twice already tonight, and I'd just reviewed it 20 minutes ago after the hatch alarm. I set the printout down on the desk next to the logbook and pulled the keyboard forward, sliding out the original folded paper Buck had left. I unfolded it carefully with one hand, my wrapped thumb staying clear. The original Rule 4 was still there, unchanged. Camera 4 showing static, intentional. Do not repair or reposition. I looked back at the printout. The fake Rule 4 told me to open the door and check the hallway. The footsteps I'd heard 5 minutes ago had stopped right outside that door. The hallway camera had shown nothing, and now the printer, without anyone touching it, without me sending any command, had spit out a modified version of the rules trying to get me to unlock the office and step outside. I sat back in the chair. That was the moment I fully understood it. The rules weren't fixed. Something inside this building could rewrite them, could print out new versions, could try to push me into a mistake by making it look official, by making it look like procedure. Buck's logbook entry came back. Guidelines shortened, explanations removed. Explanations counted as answering. This thing, whatever it was, could communicate, could push back, could print. I looked at the printer under the desk, then at the monitor showing the radar status with its persistent red hatch text, then at the second monitor still displaying that ceiling angle of me sitting here. The screen version's chest rose and fell. Still no blinking. I needed to call Buck. But I couldn't use the phone because the phone had just tried calling itself. Couldn't use the radio because the voice on the radio had known about the coffee stain on my sleeve, and Buck's rules said don't respond during the window. The window had probably ended by now. It was around 2:09, maybe 2:10, but I didn't trust it. I needed to reach her without using anything that could talk back. My phone was in my jacket pocket. Personal cell, no connection to the site systems. I could call her on that. Buck had given me her number during the briefing, said to call for generator failure or dome faults. I'd saved it under Buck site. I pulled out my phone. The screen lit up. 2:09 a.m. March 6th. Battery at 68%. I opened my contacts and found her name. My thumb, good hand, not the bleeding one, hovered over the call button. Then I stopped. Buck had said call for generator failure or actual dome faults. The hatch text was still red on the monitor, so that probably qualified as a dome fault. But she'd also been really specific about not calling for anything else. Twice, in that flat tone that made it clear she meant it. And her logbook entry had been weird. The part about explanations, about answering being how it gets a grip. If I called her, I'd have to explain what was happening. The tapping, the smell, the footsteps, the phone ringing itself, the printer making fake rules, and explaining might count as answering, might give it, whatever it was, more of a grip. I lowered the phone. I looked at the logbook instead, flipped to the current page where I'd written my entry at 0203. The blood-stained printout was still stapled there, March 7th in the header. My blood dried into a brown stain over the date. I could write Buck's number in the logbook, just to keep it in sight. So I wouldn't have to open my phone again and risk... what? Risk it calling her on its own? Risk the screen doing something like the monitors were doing? I picked up the pen, then I stopped. Writing her number down felt wrong. Felt like putting it somewhere the site could see it. The printer had access to... what? The network? The computer system? If I wrote her number in the logbook, would that count as introducing it into the site's awareness? Would the phone start ringing her number? Would the radio try to reach her frequency? I set the pen down. No. I'd keep her number in my phone, in my contacts. And I wouldn't write it anywhere this building could read it. The radio on the desk clicked once, a soft mechanical sound. I looked at it. The speaker had gone quiet. No static, no hiss, just silence. 2:10 a.m. The window had ended. 1:50 to 2:10, Rule 1 said. 20 minutes of radio silence where I wasn't supposed to key the mic or respond. The voice that had said my name and described the coffee stain had come through during that window, and now the window was done. The radio sat there quiet. I checked the monitors. Hallway camera still showed empty hallway. Just concrete floor and fluorescent lights in the bathroom door at the far end. Exterior camera showed the dark path between the building and the dome platform. Grass at the frame edge shifting in wind. Ladder shaft showed concrete and metal rungs. No movement. The fourth camera still showed static. The second monitor still showed me from the ceiling angle, and the screen version still wasn't blinking. I was still inside the 2 to 3 a.m. window. Rule 6. Do not leave the building between 2 and 3 a.m. That gave me 50 minutes left before I could step outside, but I could move inside the building. The rule didn't say I had to stay in the office. The red hatch text was still on the radar monitor. The hatch was open, or had been open, or the system thought it was open, and I'd heard footsteps in the hallway, bare feet on concrete, fast and light, stopping right outside the office door. The hallway camera hadn't shown anything. I looked at the door. Push-button lock still engaged, the little metal nub sticking out from the knob. Locked from the inside, just like Rule 9 said to do. The building creaked, the dome groaned outside in the wind, metal flexing against concrete. I made a decision. I stood up from the chair. My legs felt stiff, and the wrapped thumb throbbed when I moved my hand. The paper towel was nearly soaked through. I'd need to change it soon, maybe add pressure, but that could wait. I needed to check the breaker room. The generator was in there, and Buck had shown me the panels and the manual start button. If the hatch was actually open, if something had triggered that alarm, maybe it had pulled enough power to cause a fluctuation. Maybe checking the breakers would show me something concrete, something I could log, something that made sense. And the breaker room was just down the hallway. 10 steps, maybe 12. I'd walked past it twice already tonight. I grabbed the flashlight from the desk drawer and tested it again. Beam came on strong, white and steady. I clicked it off and kept it in my good hand. The footsteps had just been pipes. Pipes cooling, metal contracting, something settling in the walls. That was normal in buildings like this. I'd worked night shifts in a Billings warehouse for 8 months, and that place made noise all the time. Bangs and creaks and footsteps that weren't footsteps. This was the same thing. Just pipes. I unlocked the office door, turned the push-button knob and pulled it open. The hallway was empty. Fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, concrete floor, bathroom door at the far end, utility room door on the right, halfway down. Everything exactly how it had been at 1:15 when I'd walked to the bathroom. I stepped out into the hallway. The office light behind me went out. I turned. The fluorescent fixture in the office had been on 2 seconds ago, and now it was dark. The glow from the monitors still lit the room in faint green and white, but the overhead light was gone. I looked down the hallway toward the bathroom. The far light went out. The one above the bathroom door just clicked off, clean and sudden. Then the next one, the light above the utility room door. They were going out in sequence, one by one, a neat line pulling toward me, each fixture going dark in turn. The next light went out. Now there were only 2 left. The one directly above me and the one at the hallway's opposite end, back toward the entrance. I should have gone back into the office. Should have locked the door and sat back down and waited for 3 a.m. But the breaker room was right there, right through the utility room door, 10 feet ahead in the shrinking light. The next fixture went dark. Now it was just the light above me, and I was standing in a small circle of buzzing fluorescent white with darkness on both sides, and I could feel it pulling me forward, pulling me deeper, and my legs were already moving. I walked toward the utility room door, and the last light went out behind me. I backed toward the office. The hallway lights were dying one by one, the fixtures going dark in sequence like someone was flipping switches down the line. Each one made a small electric click when it went out. I counted them without meaning to. 5, 6, 7. The office door moved. It swung wider on its own, smooth and deliberate like someone was pulling it from inside. Not fast, just steady. The hinges didn't squeak. I hadn't touched it. I'd left it open when I stepped into the hallway maybe 30 seconds ago, and now it was opening further, the gap widening from maybe 40 degrees to something closer to 90. I grabbed the edge and tried to push it back. The metal was cold under my palm. I shoved it toward the frame and reached for the push-button lock. But when I pressed the button in and released the door, the latch just slid past the strike plate. It wouldn't catch. I tried again, pushing harder, making sure the button was fully depressed, but the mechanism slipped past the hole like the frame had shifted half an inch to the left. The last hallway light went out behind me. I stepped back into the office and let the door go. It drifted open again, settling at the same wide angle. The monitors were still glowing on the desk. The radar screen still showed the red hatch text. The second monitor still had the 4-panel camera grid. Hallway, exterior, ladder shaft, static on 4. Then the view jumped. The grid disappeared and the whole screen filled with a single feed. The ladder shaft. I recognized the concrete walls and the metal rungs, same as before, but the angle was different now. Lower. Like the camera had tilted down toward the base of the ladder instead of looking straight up the shaft. There was someone at the bottom. A tall figure. Maybe 6.5 feet. Hard to tell without reference, but the proportions looked wrong. Too narrow in the shoulders. The head was cocked to one side, tilted up toward the hatch at the top of the shaft. And one arm was raising slowly, fingers extended like it was reaching or pointing. The hatch text on the radar monitor blinked off, then back on. The alarm started again. Same chirp as before, steady and mechanical, one beep every 2 seconds. I looked at the camera feed. The figure didn't move except for the hand, which kept rising until the arm was fully extended overhead, pointing straight up the ladder shaft toward the hatch I couldn't see. Then the chirping stopped mid-beep, just like before. I closed my eyes. Rule 2. If knocking occurs on exterior door after midnight, do not open it, but log time and number of knocks. I didn't remember anything about closing your eyes, but Buck's logbook had said explanations were removed, and maybe that was one of them. Don't look. Don't answer. Don't engage. The tapping came back. 3 taps, same as before. Knuckles or fingernails on metal, but not from the ceiling this time. From the wall to my left, about shoulder height. Then 3 more from the wall behind me, near the filing cabinets. Then the right wall, closer to the desk. Short bursts. Moving. Like something was circling the room, measuring the distance between itself and where I was sitting. I kept my eyes closed. My pulse was loud in my ears. The paper towel around my thumb was completely soaked now, warm and sticky, and I could feel blood starting to run down toward my wrist. The tapping continued. Left wall again, lower this time. Then the door frame. Then the desk itself, right next to the keyboard. I opened my eyes. The monitor still showed the ladder shaft. The figure was gone. The camera angle had shifted back to its original position, looking straight up the concrete tube at the metal rungs disappearing into darkness. I looked down at the desk. The logbook was still open to the page where I'd written my entry at 0203 HRs. The printout was still stapled to the sheet, the one with the wrong date and the horizontal line on the radar scan. But the blood spot where my thumb had bled onto the paper, the small red circle that had spread into the fibers near the March 7th header, had changed. It was darker now, not dried. Darker. And the paper around it had pulled inward, like something had burned through from underneath. The edges were crisp and black, and the center was just gone. A neat round hole about the size of a dime, punched clean through the printout and into the logbook page below it. I leaned closer. The hole went all the way through. I could see the desk surface underneath. The office door opened further. I didn't touch it. I was 3 feet away, hands on the desk, staring at the hole in the paper. But the door swung wider, past 90 degrees now, almost parallel with the wall. The hinges didn't make a sound. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Not like the quick bare feet pattern from before. These were boots or hard shoes, deliberate and evenly spaced, coming down the hallway from the direction of the entrance. Each step echoed slightly, the way concrete does in a narrow space. They stopped just outside the office. I looked at the hallway camera feed. Empty. Same fluorescent lights, same bathroom door at the far end, same concrete floor. Nothing there. I looked at the second monitor, the one that had shown me sitting in the chair with my eyes open while I blinked. The camera was still on that ceiling angle, looking down into the office. I could see myself at the desk, hands flat on the surface, logbook open, radio beside it, same as before. Except the version on the screen wasn't looking at the logbook anymore. It was looking up, straight at the camera, straight at me. And it was smiling, not a normal smile. The mouth was too wide, pulled back too far on both sides, and the teeth were visible all the way to the molars. The eyes weren't blinking, just staring, fixed and flat, while the smile stretched wider. I wasn't smiling. I was sitting perfectly still with my mouth closed, watching the screen. The thing on the monitor tilted its head slowly to the left, still smiling, still staring. I shoved my chair back and grabbed the logbook, the paper. Buck's entry had said answering is how it gets a grip. The rules said leave the paper under the keyboard exactly as found. But the printout, the one I'd stapled to the log, the one with my blood on it, that wasn't Buck's paper. That was something else. And now it had a hole in it, punched from the inside, and the thing in the hallway was standing right outside the open door I couldn't latch. I ripped the logbook off the desk, pages flapping, and stepped toward the doorway. The footsteps moved, just one step, closer. I dropped the logbook flat on the threshold, right in the gap between the office and the hallway, so the stapled printout sat exactly on the edge. The blood-spotted page with the hole in it, lying there like a barrier. The footsteps stopped. I grabbed the stapler from the desk drawer, the same one that had cut my thumb. Heavy black plastic, full cartridge, the kind that holds 200 staples in a long strip. I knelt down next to the logbook, flipped it open so the printout was facing up, and pressed the stapler against the paper. Click. The staple punched through. I moved the stapler an inch to the left and pressed again. Click. Another staple. Then another. I worked in a circle around the hole, driving staples through the printout and into the logbook page, and into the cardboard backing underneath, over and over, sealing the edges. The paper moved. Not the whole sheet, just the area around the hole. It rippled, like something was pressing up from below, trying to push through. I kept stapling. My hand was shaking, but I held the stapler steady, punching metal through paper in tight rows, overlapping the lines, covering every inch around the burned spot. The monitor version, the one that had been smiling, appeared in the doorway, not on the screen, in the actual doorway, standing there. It looked exactly like me. Same height, same jacket, same boots. But the face was wrong. The smile was still too wide, and the eyes were still flat and unblinking, and when it moved, it didn't bend right. The joints folded at angles that didn't match bone structure. It stepped forward. I drove another staple through the paper, then another. The figure folded. That's the only way I can describe it. It didn't fall or collapse. It folded like someone had creased it down the middle, and then it flattened, compressing from 3 dimensions into 2, and the edges pulled inward toward the hole in the printout. I stapled faster. The figure was shrinking, flattening further, the legs and arms and torso all bending into impossible geometry as it funneled toward the dark spot on the page. 1 more staple, then 2 more. The figure slipped into the hole and disappeared. The paper went still. The hole was still there, but the edges weren't moving anymore. Just a clean, round burn mark surrounded by maybe 30 staples in overlapping rows, holding it down. I sat back on the floor, breathing hard, stapler still in my good hand. The radio went dead quiet, not static, not hissing, just silent, like someone had unplugged it. The hallway lights came back on, all of them, one by one, starting at the far end near the bathroom and working back toward the office. Each fixture buzzed to life, fluorescent white flooding the concrete floor and painted walls, until the whole hallway looked exactly like it had when Buck first walked me through at 1840 hers yesterday. I stood up slowly, legs shaking, and looked at the threshold. The logbook was still there, open to the stapled page, sitting half in the office and half in the hallway. The printout looked normal now, just paper. The blood spot was still visible and the hole was still there, but it wasn't moving. I picked up the logbook carefully, holding it by the edges, and set it back on the desk. The monitors had reset. The 4-panel camera grid was back. Hallway empty, exterior path empty, ladder shaft empty, camera 4 showing static. The radar monitor still displayed the red hatch text, but the alarm wasn't chirping anymore. I checked my phone. 2:14 a.m. Still inside the restricted window. Still 50 minutes until I was supposed to leave the building. I sat down in the chair and wrapped my thumb tighter with a fresh paper towel from the bathroom. The cut was still bleeding, but slower now. I kept pressure on it and watched the monitors. Nothing moved. At 6:30 a.m., headlights swept past the window. I heard a vehicle door close outside, then boots on the concrete path. The metal door opened and Buck walked down the hallway. Same field jacket and dark slacks, same key ring in her hand. She stopped in the office doorway and looked at me. Then at the logbook on the desk. Then at the threshold where I'd laid it down. "You stapled it," she said. "Yeah." She stepped into the room and picked up the logbook, flipping it open to the page with the printout. She studied the hole and the rows of staples around it, running her finger along the edge without touching the burned spot. "How many times?" "I don't know. Maybe 30. I didn't count." She nodded once, still looking at the page. "That's the only workable thing. Pinning it down. Most people try to run or call or explain, and that just makes it worse." "The figure went into the hole," I said. "It folded and went in." "It did." She closed the logbook and set it back on the desk, smoothing the cover flat. "The paper has to stay there until the next storm front. Probably 3 or 4 days. The radar needs something physical to bite into, something it can track. Otherwise, the problem just moves. Moves where? Somewhere else. Another site, another contractor." She looked at me. "You did good. Keep the page exactly where it is. Don't remove the staples. Don't touch the hole." I didn't say anything. Buck picked up her clipboard from the desk and checked something on the top sheet. "Barker's crew will be back tonight at 2100 to HR's to finish the install. You're off rotation until then. Go home, sleep." "I'm not coming back." She looked up. "That's fair." I stood and grabbed my jacket from the back of the chair. My thumb was still throbbing, the paper towel soaked through again. But I didn't care. I just wanted out of the building. Buck walked me to the door and unlocked it. The sky outside was pale gray, not quite sunrise, and the wind had died down to almost nothing. The dome sat motionless on its platform 30 feet away. "Get that thumb looked at," Buck said. "Yeah?" I walked to my truck and got in. The engine started on the first try. I put it in gear and drove down the gravel road toward the highway, watching the radar dome shrink in the rearview mirror until the road curved and it disappeared behind a low rise. By noon, I was in Glasgow, parked outside a diner on 2nd Avenue, phone in my hand. I pulled up Jose Wallace's number. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Jackson, how'd the first night go?" "I'm done," I said. "I'm not going back." There was a pause. "You signed for 3 nights. Barker's crew needs coverage through the install. Find someone else." "Jackson." I hung up and turned the phone off, held the power button until the screen went dark. Then I pulled the battery out and set both pieces on the passenger seat. I wasn't answering any more calls connected to that site. Not from Jose. Not from Buck. Not from anyone tied to Beaver Slide Hill or the Glasgow Nex Rat or anything within 50 miles of that dome. I kept the phone off for 2 weeks. That was it.